to Hume's view, watch a short video clip now on biological machines.
Okay, it hasn't started as yet.
You can override my screen, or I have to click shut.
No, you may have to close your screen.
Stop share.
Yeah, stop share and then share the video.
No, it's Barker's team will be doing that.
Okay.
Hey, he wanted the entire video or
Right,
only
Reverend Carl, over to you.
All right, we're going to begin it shortly. Until 8:27, correct?
You're right.
Okay.
Is there supposed to be volume, Brett?
There has to be some that video.
Okay.
So they would have to.
1 second.
Reverend Carl, you may have to restart it with the volume.
Century. Spectacular.
Restart
Okay,
it?
it's playing. Just heard it.
Okay, no problem.
Throughout the second half of the 20th century, spectacular technologies revolutionized scientific understanding of the cell, the basic unit of life. During an interview with biochemist Michael Behe, Strobel learned how this new knowledge has shaken the foundations of Darwin's theory.
In the 19th century, when Darwin was alive, scientists thought that the basis of life, the cell, was some simple glob of protoplasm, like a little piece of jello or something that was not hard to explain at all. But with the hard work of science in the 20th century, we've seen that the cell is far from simple. It's got very complicated molecular machines and things that are very resistant to Darwinian explanation.
Michael Behe has devoted his career to the study of the design and operation of the cell. He has also written extensively on the biochemical challenge to evolution.
Most people have no idea of how small and complex cells are. A typical cell from you or me, called a eukaryotic cell, is probably a tenth of the size of the head of a pin. And yet, in that single cell, there are about 3 billion units of DNA making out the chromosomes. And those 3 billion units make the molecular machines of the cell, literally machines that make the cell work.
With computer animation, we can enter the cell. Here, the staggering complexity of its molecular machinery is clearly seen.
It's like going into an automobile factory. The factory has a large number of machines. The parts have to fit together in very specific ways to do their jobs. And if things go wrong, the cell is in big trouble. And just one cell is enormously complex, but humans, you and I, are made from trillions of cells. And those trillions of cells have to fit together in the right way and do their own job. Darwinism was a lot more plausible when we were thinking about globs of protoplasm than it is when we're thinking about molecular machines.
Each of these biochemical machines is a masterpiece of engineering and nanotechnology. They are essential to functions as vital and diverse as vision, photosynthesis, and the production of energy in the cell. Michael Behe has studied several of these machines, including the flagellum, a remarkable rotary motor.
I remember the first time I looked in a biochemistry textbook and I saw a drawing of something called a bacterial flagellum with all of its parts in all of its glory. It had a propeller and the hook region and the drive shaft and the motor. And I looked at that and I said, that's an outboard motor. That's designed. That's no chance assemblage of parts.
Behe's reaction was not surprising, especially when the bacterial flagellar motor is animated and magnified more than 50,000 times to display the details of its construction and operation.
Howard Berg at Harvard has labeled it the most efficient machine in the universe. These machines, some of them are running at 100,000 RPMs and are hardwired into a signal transduction or sensory mechanism so that it's getting feedback from the environment.
It's got some tail proteins which act as the propeller. When the flagellum rotates, these push against the water and therefore push the bacterium forward. And the motor uses a flow of acid from outside of the cell to the inside of the cell to power the turning.
The bacterial flagellum has 2 gears, forward and reverse, water-cooled, proton motive force. It has a stator, it has a rotor, it has a U-joint, it has a drive shaft, it has a propeller. It's not convenient that we give them these names. That's truly their function.
In all, about 40 different protein parts are required to build a flagellar motor. Half of them are constructor proteins, specialized mechanisms that assemble the flagellum's individual components. Since its discovery, biologists have tried to understand how a machine of such superb design could have arisen gradually, without foresight or plan, through the biological pathway Darwin envisioned.
I think what Darwin was trying to show was that things that look designed aren't really designed, but that we can find naturalistic processes to account for the complexity of life. Darwin theorized that every part of every living organism evolved through natural selection, a blind process that acts upon random changes in the cell.
Darwin believed that, given enough time, these random variations would transform the simplest cells into the great diversity of life that inhabits our planet. In his study of evolution and molecular machines, Michael Behe has raised a significant challenge to the creative power of Darwin's mechanism of natural selection. It is called irreducible complexity.
Irreducible complexity was coined by Mike Behe in describing these molecular machines. Basically what it says is that you have multi-component parts to any given organelle or system in a cell, all of which are necessary for function. That is, if you remove one part, you lose function of that system.
Irreducible complexity can be illustrated by a familiar, non-biological machine, a mousetrap. The trap is composed of 5 basic pieces: a catch to hold the bait, a strong spring, a thin bent rod called the hammer, a holding bar to secure the hammer in place, and a platform upon which the entire system is mounted. If any one of these parts is missing or defective, the mechanism will not work. All components of this irreducibly complex system must be present simultaneously for the machine to perform its function: catching mice. The concept of irreducible complexity also applies to biological machines, including the bacterial flagellum.
All told, there are about 40 different protein parts which are necessary for this machine to work. And if any of those parts are missing, then either you get a flagellum that doesn't work because it's missing the hook or it's missing the drive shaft or whatever, or it doesn't even get built within the cell. You can't put something like that together gradually because they need a large number of parts interacting with each other at the same time before they work at all.
Without the tools to observe the machinery of the cell, and long before the idea of irreducible complexity, Charles Darwin offered a way to test his own theory. In Origin of Species, he wrote, "If it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed, which could not possibly have been formed by numerous, successive, slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down."
Darwin acknowledged that if someone identified a biological system that could not have been constructed in incremental steps over long periods of time, then his theory would be invalid. And what Michael Behe and others have discovered is the existence
Right, so let me find back on. All right, so that Hume would have been rubbished by the fact that there are biological machines.
Excuse me, Rev, just enlarging again. Just click your mouse right there. Don't move it. Click it right there, yes.
Yes, so Hume would have been rubbish in his idea that organisms may be only superficially like machines, but natural in essence. There are biological machines, contrary to Hume and his colleagues, in nature, and they are showing that they have to be intricately designed. There has to be logos or mind behind their engineering, behind their origin, not just chance, which, as I told you earlier, is non-causal. It's a nothing. It can't cause anything. If you sum up the poetic sentiments of the psalm, it is simply saying, I'm sorry, let me just give credit to Illustra Media for giving us permission to use that video clip and another piece that you'll see shortly. The video is The Case for a Creator. I highly recommend it. For me, a kind of a crazy pastor, I would show The Case for a Creator on a Sunday morning service and don't preach. Just show it and let the brethren who are scientific minded or the youngsters in high school ask questions about it later on. Excellent suggestion from me, a half crazy pastor, retired pastor, for the clergy in the room. The Case for a Creator by Illustra Media. They were giving it away free some years ago online. If you sum up the poetic sentiments of the psalm, it is simply saying that the celestial bodies were made by God and testify to the existence of God. Is this notion credible scientifically? The answer is a resounding yes. And astronomers, albeit with embarrassment and reluctance, are the ones providing the evidence. The late NASA scientist Robert Jastrow, who professed to be an agnostic, said in his book, God and the Astronomers, quote, let me get this lined up for you. Quote, five independent lines of evidence. The motion of the galaxies, the discovery of the primordial fireball, the law of thermodynamics, the abundance of helium in the atmosphere, in the universe, and the life story of the stars point to one conclusion. All indicate that the universe had a beginning, end quote, in his 1992 edition of his book, God and the Astronomers, at page 103. Why don't we listen to the Bible? The Bible says, in the beginning, God created the heavens. Elsewhere, thou, Lord, in the beginning laid the foundations of the earth, and the heavens are the work of thine hands. And elsewhere, Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God. I must close this section. For me, the most telling comment from an astronomer is from the said Robert Jastrow. He says, quote, let me take that back. As quote, a sound explanation may exist for the explosive birth of our universe, but if it does, science cannot find out what the explanation is. The scientist's pursuit of the past ends in the moment of creation. For the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountain of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peak. As he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries, end quote. I laugh at that because I'm a theologian myself. You need to find that book, God and the Astronomers, 1992 edition. There was an earlier one, and this quotation is at page 106 to 107. So, based on current scientific findings, it is no longer defensible to say what Carl Sagan said years ago, quote, the cosmos is all there is, all there was, and all there ever will be, end quote. Wrong, wrong, dead wrong. There was a time when the universe was not, and by the only logical option, a supreme mind and will was exercised to bring time and space into being. That supreme mind will is the personal God whom the Bible says repeatedly transcends time and space and is the best explanation for the evidence that the universe provides. I want you to listen to Alan Sandage, winner of the Crafoord Prize, astronomy's equivalent of the Nobel. He says, quote, I find it quite improbable that the order in the universe came out of chaos. There has to be some organizing principle. God to me is a mystery, but is the explanation for the miracle of existence, why there is something rather than nothing, end quote. This is cited in John Lennox's book, Gunning for God, at page 35. Of course, the super brilliant astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson mocks the notion of intelligent design within the universe by pointing out the life-threatening and dangerous zones of the universe and of Earth. He studiously forgets a few things, though. One, despite the realities he alludes to, he can function as an astrophysicist along with his colleagues only because they are dealing with a universe which overall allows for scientific predictions, and such predictions presuppose and or entail order and design a la laws of nature. Two, nature now is not what it was at creation, and man's role in tampering with nature must not be overlooked. But here's an overlooked point highlighted by Roy Varghese, who co-authored Anthony Flou's last book, There is a God. Since Hume and many non-religious scientists are so hooked on the inviolable regularity of the laws of nature, one might ask if these laws came into being miraculously with the origin of the universe, or they developed gradually over time. Varghese asks, then answers an uncomfortable set of questions. In this regard, he queries, quote, how were the laws of nature conceived? And just as important, how were things forced to follow the laws? What compels the protons and neutrons in an atom to be bound by strong nuclear forces that are strong enough to overcome the positive charges that could blow apart the nucleus? Who keeps the underlying laws of nature in place? Ultimately, it's God who ensures their continued operation. Thus, God did not simply invent all things, but constantly holds them in being. This is Roy Varghese in his wonderful book, The Wonder of the World, A Journey from Modern Science to the Mind of God, 2003, at pages 173 and 63. So then, the best explanation of the origin of the universe, given its contingent nature, fine-tuning, and complexity, is an intelligent creator God, a personal causal agent, not nothingness plus time plus chance. The psalmist, inspired by God, wrote in poetic sentiments some 3,500 years ago what science is now able to confirm. The heavens declare the glory of God. The firmament showeth his handiwork. Nature continues to give eloquent testimony or compelling evidence concerning the existence of God. What is your personal verdict on the evidence? God deserves a place in your life, since in Jesus Christ, he paid the price for your sins so that you might not die for your own sins. There is arguably no greater beyond reasonable doubt evidence for the existence of a personal intelligent designer, God, than the presence and pervasiveness of biological information in all living things. Ponder the testimony of atheistic biologist Richard Dawkins on the nature of biological information. He says, quote, at the molecular genetic level, every single one of more than a trillion cells in the body contains about 1,000 times as much precisely coded digital information as my entire computer, end quote, in his book, The Blind Watchmaker, 1986 at XIII. What Dawkins is getting at here is the stubborn fact that DNA, the molecule of heredity, is information rich. In order for any organism to be whatever it is, its genetic program or DNA must specify what sort of organism it will be, and within surprisingly narrow limits, what specific characteristics it will assume. The DNA must be faithfully copied to every single cell of an organism that will eventually consist of billions of cells if the organism is to remain viable. I got that from John W. Oller Jr. and others in The Creation Hypothesis, 1994, edited by J.P. Moreland at 254 and 253. Each of us began as a tiny entity about the size of a full stop. Yet, all of our physical characteristics were spelled out in our DNA, and this coded information guided our development into adulthood. Modern scientists, with their advanced technology and so-called superior intelligence, still can't store so much information in so small a container as one cell of the human body. Ponder Dawkins' words again. What would any rational person conclude about the origin of a computer, a mechanical information storing facility? By chance, natural cause, or by intelligent cause? What is the inference to the best explanation here? Bear in mind, too, that information is a non-material mental entity and cannot at all originate from matter, though it can be stored in matter. It follows inexorably then that once we detect genuine, complex, or specified information, we must conclude that intelligence is behind its origin. This has been the scientific basis or justification for the SETI program, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. SETI scientists scan the millions of radio signals produced in outer space in search of a specified complex pattern distinguishable from the normal noise, which are unspecified or specified but simple signal patterns of outer space. I would recommend for your viewing the movie Contact, a bit old but still insightful. It is understandable to me then why the late British atheist and renowned philosopher Anthony Flew abandoned atheism and gave one of three reasons for his change as the formidable challenge of finding a naturalistic, non-God explanation for the origin of the coding and information processing that is central to all life forms. In his There Is a God, 2007, at page 126. I want you to watch now another piece of Illustra Media's The Case for a Creator on biological information. The DVD is available online, The Case for a Creator. I have to stop sharing here again for my friends there to play that video clip for you. Over to you, Team Barker. Brother Barker. The next video clip, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
I'm hearing you. We're ready for the continuation of the video clip.
Sorry, what are you asking for?
The video, the next video.
Clip.
The second half of the video?
Yes, please.
Okay, one moment.
In the meantime, please formulate your questions. You can put them in the chat or you can write them down so that they will be precise when you present them and succinct.
All right, just let me know if the audio is too low or anything. I'm going to play it now.
Okay.
Discovered is the existence of biological machinery that cannot be explained away by Darwinian processes. Darwin's failed predictions have in fact falsified his own theory.
Hearing well now.
The existence of complex biological machines raises an obvious question. If natural selection wasn't the agent of their construction, then what was? The centerpiece of my investigation was an interview with philosopher of science, Dr. Stephen Meyer. Meyer, who holds a PhD from Cambridge University, brought me face to face with the most efficient information processing system in the universe. the DNA molecule and its language of life.
The discovery of the information-bearing properties of DNA and RNA is a fundamental challenge to all materialistic theories of the origin of life. Neo-Darwinism and its associated theories of chemical evolution and the like will not be able to survive the biology of the information age, the biology of the 21st century.
Meyer's conclusions are based upon his understanding of the DNA molecule and the genetic instructions that are locked within the nucleus of living cells.
In 1953, when Watson and Crick elucidated the structure of the DNA molecule, they discovered that DNA was a carrier of genetic information in the form of a 4-character digital code. That is to say, that DNA functions like a software program, only more complex than anyone has ever created or devised. For a biological system to run and operate, it needs genetic information to build the proteins and protein machines that cause the cells to maintain their function.
This information is stored in a precise arrangement of 4 chemicals that scientists represent with the letters A, C, T, and G. Sequences of these chemicals provide the instructions necessary to assemble complex protein molecules that in turn help form structures as diverse as eyes, legs, wings, and hearts. This code has been called the language of life, and it is the most densely packed and elaborately detailed assembly of information in the known universe.
Geneticist Michael Denton has estimated that the amount of biological information necessary to build all of the proteins in all the species of organisms that have ever existed on planet Earth could be held in a single teaspoon. And we'd still have room left over for all of the information contained in every book ever written. The more I learned about DNA, the more I understood the significance of what Stephen Meyer called the most fundamental question facing biology today. Where did the information in DNA come from? How did it arise in the first place?
Well, lots of people have wanted to explain the origin of information by reference to the laws of physics and chemistry, or by reference to the chemical properties of the constituent parts of the DNA. But that would be like saying that you could explain the information in this morning's New York Times headline by reference to the physics and chemistry of ink bonding to paper. There is a chemical explanation as to why the ink sticks to the paper, but that does not explain the way the ink got arranged to convey a message that could be understood by speakers of the English language. Information requires a material medium, but it transcends the material medium.
An explanation for the origin of the genetic instructions needed to build the first life is the holy grail of 21st century biology. Theories proposing that this information arose through natural selection acting upon non-living molecules, or the self-organizing power of chemicals in a primordial soup, have repeatedly failed. Even time and blind chance, the oft-invoked saviors of implausible biological scenarios, have fallen far short as accounts for the source of the instructions in DNA. Mathematicians, for example, have calculated that a universe filled with monkeys, typing relentlessly throughout the oldest estimated age of the cosmos, would have no realistic chance of producing Shakespeare's play Hamlet, let alone a transcript of the genetic information required to build even the simplest living cell.
Based on our uniform and repeated experience, which is the basis of all scientific reasoning about the past, there is only one known cause for the origin of information, and that cause is intelligence. Whether we're looking at a hieroglyphic inscription, a section of text in a book, or a computer software, if you have information and you trace it back to its source, invariably you come to an intelligence. Therefore, when you find information inscribed along the backbone of the DNA molecule in the cell, the most rational inference, based on our repeated experience, is that an intelligence of some kind played a role in the origin of that information.
The implications of the scientific evidence, coupled with Meyer's logic, are profound. If we are finding information inside every cell and every living creature. Could that not be, in a sense, the signature of a creator?
"30 centuries before science unlocked the mysteries of genetic information, or a telescope probed billions of light years into space, the Hebrew shepherd and poet David wrote eloquently of a creator who revealed his existence and power through all that he had made. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they proclaim knowledge. Their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the end of the world."
God himself is invisible. He is a spirit. And yet, one of the purposes he has for us is to find him so we can know him. And he's left behind a series of clues. And sometimes we just have to kind of take our blinders off and get beyond our presuppositions and say, wait a minute, I am going to pursue the evidence of science wherever it points. And if it takes me to a very uncomfortable conclusion that there is a creator, then if the evidence points in that direction, that's the way I'm going to go.
According to a lot of mainstream media, the theory of intelligent design is a faith-based idea. And in saying that, they want to dismiss it as something that has no basis in science. But the media has confused a fundamental issue. They're confusing the evidence for the theory with the implications of the theory. The theory of intelligent design may well have implications that are supportive of theistic belief, but the theory is not based on theistic belief. It's based on the discovery of digital code in cells, miniature machines in cells, the fine-tuning of laws of physics and chemistry, and standard ways of scientific reasoning about the remote past in the history of life.
40 years ago, a lecturer in a high school biology class convinced an inquisitive 14-year-old freshman that there was no God. Ironically, years later, it was an open-minded investigation of scientific evidence that led Lee Strobel to belief in a creator.
One of the most interesting things I've learned as I've gone on this journey of scientific discovery has been that you don't have to commit intellectual suicide to come to the conclusion that there is an intelligent designer. Because today, science is pointing more directly and more powerfully toward a creator than any other time in the history of the world. I was trained in journalism and law to respond to truth. I had to take a step of faith in the same direction that evidence is flowing, which is logical and rational. We do that every day of our life. We make steps of faith based on the evidence that we perceive. And so it was the most logical and rational step I've ever taken to put my faith in the creator that science tells me exists.
Or we can hold it there, thanks. So let me get my stuff reorganized now. Select, all right. PowerPoint, share. Is it visible? Are you seeing it?
Yes.
All right. All right, let me just go on now. So in the field of origin of life studies, leading researchers bluntly admit their ignorance of the origin of genetic information. Carl Woese, an internationally recognized leader in origin of life studies, lamented, quote, "The origins of translation, that is, before it became a true decoding mechanism, are for now lost in the dimness of the past. And I don't wish to engage here in hand-waving speculations as to what polymerization processes might have preceded and given rise to it, or to speculate on the origins of tRNA charging systems, or the genetic code," end quote. This is in RNA 2001, 1064, cited in Flu at page 128. Antonio Lascano, who served for 2 terms as president of the International Society for the study of the origin of life, said, quote, life could not have evolved without a genetic mechanism, one able to store, replicate, and transmit to its progeny information that can change with time. Precisely how the first genetic machinery evolved also persists as an unresolved issue. The exact pathway for life's origin may never be known, end quote. This is in Natural History, February 2006, cited in Flu at page 130. Yet ponder the strange, albeit old words of the Nobel Prize-winning physiologist George Wald of Harvard University concerning the origin of life. He says, quote, time is in fact the hero of the plot. The time with which we have to deal is of the order of 2 billion years. What we regard as impossible on the basis of human experience is meaningless here. Given so much time, the impossible becomes possible, the possible probable, and the probable virtually certain. I'm sorry for laughing, but this is just idiocy, even from a Nobel Prize winning. Let me just read that again. Given so much time, the impossible becomes possible, the possible probable, and the probable virtually certain. One has only to wait. Time itself performs the miracles. We choose to believe the impossible, that life arose spontaneously by chance. You hear that nonsense again? By chance? Chance is not an entity, can cause absolutely nothing. This is George Wald, quote, the essay, The Origin of Life, in Editors of Scientific American, The Physics and Chemistry of Life, 1955, page 12. This is nice sounding nonsense because time, like chance, has no causative powers at all. And so it's not a mechanism that can accomplish anything. So Wald's alleged hero is pure fiction. In stark contrast to Wald, we find a most revealing statement from the famous British mathematician and astronomer, Sir Fred Hoyle, who originated the steady-state theory of the formation of the universe. In the 1981 book, Evolution from Space, which he co-authored with fellow mathematician and astrobiologist Chandra Wickramasinghe, they admitted that though they were lifelong atheists, they were agreed that the high degree of order and specificity in the universe demanded pre-existing intelligence even to the limit of God. Both men had calculated that the odds of life appearing by random processes was 1 chance in 10 to the 40,000. I repeat that again, 1 chance in 10 to the 40,000. So they chide scientists who try to evade the God-pointing nature of first life by saying, quote, the tactic is to argue that although the chance of arriving at the biochemical system of life is utterly minuscule, there is in nature such an enormous number of other chemical systems which could also support life that any old planet like Earth would inevitably arrive sooner or later at one or another of them. This argument, and I'm quoting him still, is the veriest nonsense. And if it is to be imbibed at all, it must be swallowed with a jorum of strong ale, end quote, page 28. Now, if he were Jamaican, he would say it was swallowed with a full bottle of overproof white rum. Hoyle said something more insightful and humorous in a report in Nature magazine of November 12, 1981. He said, quote, let me see if I can pull this up for you. Oh dear, this thing has now slipped off. My system has slipped off. It was too long not being used and it's not responding to my cues. Give me a second, please. Let me just try a tactic ignorance here. I hope it will work. Let me try again, see if I can bring it back. I have to go without the slides now. Your handout that can be sent to you by request will help you, but let me just go on without this. Hoyle said something more insightful and humorous in a report in Nature magazine of November 12, 1981. He said, quote, the chance that higher life forms might have emerged by random mutations and natural selection is comparable with the chance that a tornado sweeping through a junkyard might assemble a Boeing 747 from the materials therein, end quote. I wanted to understand the intellectual cheating involved in all computer simulations of origin of life type experiments and evolutionary changes. Two problems. The scientists take first life as a given to prove how life originated, plus they use intelligence, their intelligence, to design and direct target sequences in a computer simulation to show how life could have originated or developed in an undirected, non-teleological process. And by the way, if Stanley Miller had not carefully designed a way to safely bleed off oxygen from his prebiotic soup experiment, he might have suffered damage or death. Any computer simulation in which natural selection and mutations are depicted as working together at once are fraudulent. They're all fraudulent. Because natural selection can only be involved after a replicable organism has been around for some time. Philosopher of science Stephen Meyer, whom you just saw, caused quite a stir within the scientific community with the publication of his 2009 hefty tome, Signature in the Cell, DNA and the Evidence for Intelligent Design, a Times Literary Supplement Book of the Year. Meyer's book boldly advances and cogently defends the thesis that intelligent design is the only known cause of the specified information that we find in the DNA molecule, and that after exhaustively examining the explanatory weaknesses of all scientific origin of life theories that attempt to deal with the information challenge of first life coming into being. Meyer says, quote, every major origin of life scenario, whether based on chance, necessity, or the combination, failed to explain the origin of specified information, which pointed to a source of information beyond the realm of physics and chemistry, end quote, pages 332 to 333. Then Myers boasts or beams, quote, my long investigation had turned up nothing in way of materialistic processes with the demonstrated capacity, the proven causal efficacy to produce the large amounts of specified information necessary to generate a self-replicating organism. Nor was I alone in this conclusion. Leading scientists, Francis Crick, Fred Hoyle, Paul Davies, Freeman Dyson, Eugene Wigner, Klaus Dosser, Robert Shapiro, Dean Kenyon, Leslie Orgel, Gerald Joyce, Hubert Yockey, even Stanley Miller, had all expressed skepticism either about the merits of leading theories, the relevance of prebiotic experiments, or both. Even Richard Dawkins, not known for rhetorical restraint in support of evolutionary orthodoxy, candidly admitted in 2008 that no one knows how life arose in the first place. At the same time, conscious intelligence has repeatedly shown itself capable of producing such information. It follows that mind, conscious, rational, intelligent agency, what philosophers call agent causation, now stands as the only cause known to be capable of generating large amounts of specified information, starting from a non-living state, at pages 333 and 341. Natural scientists in the House would know, and all others need to know, that the Dean Kenyon mentioned by Meyer in this quotation was co-author with Gary Steinman of the landmark 1969 book, Biochemical Predestination, which advanced the view that ordinary non-living chemicals did become living. The best explanation, and by the way, Dean Kenyon has renounced his thesis. You can find him on YouTube. Dean is D-E-A-N, Kenyon, K-E-N-Y-O-N. He has turned again, he's now an intelligent design specialist and promoter. The best explanation of the origin of first life, given the information-rich complexity of all life forms, is an intelligent designer God, a personal causal agent, not impersonality plus time plus chance. Now for a concluding postscript on nature's inexplicable God-pointing phenomena. We explore the fitness of so many things in nature for life, which demand a design inference and defies undirected chance explanations, as highlighted in Michael Denton's book, Nature's Destiny, How the Laws of Biology Reveal Purpose in the Universe. I'm going to give you brief quotations on light, water, and oxygen and their fitness for life. Quote, that the radiation from the sun and from many main sequence stars should be concentrated into a minuscule band of the electromagnetic spectrum, which provides precisely the radiation required to maintain life on Earth, is a very remarkable coincidence described as staggering by Ian Campbell in Energy and the Atmosphere. The fact that water absorbs damaging UV radiation while allowing visual light to penetrate to considerable depths has a very important consequence. It means that photosynthesis can occur in water even in the absence of the protective ozone layer, end quote. Pages 53 and 58. Quote, water gives every appearance of being uniquely fit for the type of carbon-based life that exists on Earth. Every one of its chemical and physical properties, thermal properties, surface tension, capacity to dissolve a vast number of different substances, and low viscosity, seems maximally fit not only for microscopic life, but for large warm-blooded organisms such as mammals, as well as for the generation and maintenance of a stable chemical and physical environment on the surface of the Earth, end quote, at page 19. Another, I think this is the final quotation. Quote, the chemical fitness of oxygen to living systems can only be exploited if additional conditions are satisfied. The solubility and rate at which oxygen diffuses in water is obviously critical. Since water is the matrix of life, if oxygen was either insoluble in water or chemically unstable in an aqueous solution, it would be incapable of playing any biological role. Oxygen is basically a very dangerous reactive substance and is highly toxic to life at levels above those normally encountered in nature. Oxygen toxicity is caused because a small proportion of oxygen atoms are continually interacting with water, producing highly reactive damaging radicals. In fact, all organisms which utilize oxygen possess a number of enzymes specifically designed to eliminate reactive oxygen radicals, end quote, 123, 125. What's the inference to the best explanation of these life-permitting features of light, water, and oxygen? Intelligent design or undirected chance processes? The meticulous details of the biochemical machinery of life, including the absolute cruciality of the transitional metals in the periodic table for the biochemistry of cell function, defy a non-designed explanation. Consider this statement by biochemist Michael Denton, quote, one key role played by metals in the cell is the formation of electronic circuits, and one area where these play a vital role is in energy metabolism. Moreover, it is only the transitional metal atoms, particularly iron and copper, which possess precisely the properties required to form an electronic circuit. No other atoms will do, end quote, page 199. So I wind down. What then is the conclusion of the matter? If we desire or demand no higher level of proof than that which we employ in law and in life in general, the argument for the existence of God and factoring the evidence I have adduced for the origin of the universe and the origin of life with its information-rich complexity, then the existence of God is established beyond reasonable doubt. And so I rest my case and now open for your questions, your comments, and your observations. Our moderator will guide.
Thank you very much. I'm just switching here to the question section. Thank you very much, Reverend Clinton. Now we turn over to the questions. I'm going to go straight to the ones in the chat first. What evolutionists often use as cover to mask their transition of one organism to the next is millions of years, suggesting this happens over a long period. I think this makes it easier for persons to believe their logic. What is our response to these millions of years?
Well, first you would have to assume that the millions of years calculation is scientifically precise. And in that field, radiometrical dating, the scientists themselves admit it is not a precise science. They're doing intelligent guessing, as it were. But for one organism to change to another of a radically different kind, you need genetic information in the gene pool of the one that is going to change. Otherwise, it cannot become other than what the DNA prescribes in the gene pool. So you have a major problem there. And evolutionists cannot appeal to biological evolution until they can prove that biochemical evolution is not a late non-starter. It can't happen. Non-living things, no matter how billions of years you leave them for, will still remain non-living. And yet biological evolution rests precariously, and you cannot escape it. It rests precariously on biochemical evolution. If the bottom one is a late non-starter or cannot be proven to be real, then the top one is dead in the water.
All right, I guess before I go to the next question then, on the origin of life, as we are discussing that, you know, the scientific theory proposed by Louis Pasteur says that life can only come from life.
It's a basic biological idea.
Yes.
Only life can give rise to life. Non-life cannot give rise to life.
Yes, so in keeping with that, the evolutionists will defy this same law in order to propose that non-life brought about life.
Give rise to life.
Yes.
So
go ahead.
I would recommend that everybody, after we are through here, go on YouTube, look for the name D-E-A-K-E-N-Y-O-N, Dean Kenyon. Evolutionist retracts his view on evolution. Track him down on YouTube. You will see, I think I have it in my file, but I didn't include it in the PowerPoint slides.
Okay, just give me the spelling again, and let me put it in the chat for everybody.
D-E-A-N, first name, surname Kenyon, K-E-N-Y-O-N. And it's on YouTube where he retracts his view on biochemical predestination.
All right, moving to the next question. Is the Bible reliable for scientific statements? So that's one question. There are two questions.
Well, let's just take the first.
Let's deal with the first one. Yeah.
Right. Whatever the Bible says, whatever the Bible mentions is infallible. And we'll argue that in another lecture sometime to come. The Bible does not speak falsely on anything that it states. It will report even a mistaken statement by somebody because it's concerned with facticity. This is as it was. So we have to bear in mind that the man born blind in John 9, when he says, now we know that God heareth not sinners, that is reported accurately by John. But the comment that the man made is not true. God hears sinners. Otherwise, none of us would be saved.
Part two of the question is there any archaeological discovery of the size of the walls of Jericho? How does scientific body square with the account of the crumbling of its walls? Do you want to answer this question? I can finish reading because it doesn't directly relate to. Okay. Square with the account of the crumbling of its walls in the past and now at present.
I don't know how they know what present would come in, but the evidence from archaeology is limited because archaeologists can only dig up certain sections of the earth structure. They don't do all. They themselves will tell you that archaeology as a science can provide evidence in a limited sense in that they can't dig up everywhere and at all levels. But a seismic activity of some kind is the best they have come up with for the falling of Jericho. So God could have used an earthquake to tumble it, but it certainly did tumble down, as the Old Testament record reflects.
Okay, actually there's a three-part to that from that same person, so I'll just ask the 3 and 4. I'm going to give all these questions from the same person at the same time, and then we'll go to the others. So our number 3, are there any scientific statements in the Bible that are held in contention by scientific body at present? Are there any scientific statements in the Bible that are held in contention by scientific body at present?
Well, I don't know of any. I'm not saying there is not any. I don't know of any. but I know that science has confirmed a number of things in the Bible. This fussiness about hand washing, you know, because of COVID, we go back to the Old Testament in Leviticus, where God was fussy about, look, if you come near to a dead body, wash yourself, sun yourself out, and then by evening, the ultraviolet rays of the sun would have helped to cleanse you. This is the thousands of years BC. Now we are caught onto that thing in the modern world. So they are confirming the value of cleanliness in hand washing in the scientific world.
Okay, the last question. What, if any, implication, if at every point the scientific body is in agreement with scientific statements in the Bible? What is the implication if is science in agreement with scientific statements in the Bible?
Well, when they agree, though they do it reluctantly, some have done that, they have to go on to say, well, if this is a pre-scientific age, so we have to call that information in the Old Testament usually prescience. That is spelled like pre-science, but it's pronounced prescience. Information that nobody at that time could have known. So there must have been an omniscient God behind the Old Testament documents talking about avoiding the eating of blood. Repeatedly in the first 5 books of the Old Testament, don't eat blood. We know now the value of that advice. You look at the issue of circumcision, the timing in the pre-scientific age, not the first day, not the second, the 8th day. And then the people who are in pediatrics would understand that young babies have a tendency to bleed profusely because they need vitamin K and some other things. And on the 8th day is the first time that you have the requirements for blood clotting at 100+%, and then it normalizes thereafter. Of course, now because of modern medicine, they can do circumcision at any time in the first week of a child's birth. But in the pre-scientific age, not anybody at all, not Moses, not anybody except God would have known to advise them, avoid killing off all of your children, your male children, by circumcising only on the 8th day, not the 7th, not the 9th, not the 1st, not the 3rd, on the 8th day. So the timing and the value of circumcision are confirmed by modern science as pre-scientific wisdom. And there must have been an omniscient God behind those ancient Old Testament documents.
Okay, thank you for that. And we have now from one more person, Natalie. She's speaking about the God particle, Higgs God particle. And that is the particle that is assumed that gives mass to atomic structures and so on. So she's asking, apart from biology, what's your opinion on advances in physics such as Higgs God particle, which advances the existence of dark matter and the form of astromass, and by extension, the physical universe? I'll read it again. Apart from biology, what's your opinion on advances in physics such as Higgs God particle, which advances the existence of dark matter and the form of astromass, and by extension, the physical universe?
I wouldn't extend beyond my limited knowledge of physics. I got a good grade in 1967, but I gave astronomical evidence and quoted an astronomer, Robert Jastrow. I would just stick with what I quoted from Jastrow in terms of confirmation of the origin of the universe. It was not eternal. And by that, he's rubbishing Carl Sagan's view that the cosmos is all there is, all there was, and all that ever will be. Sagan was popularly quoted and is still revered, but he was dead wrong. And he's rubbished by his own colleague, Jastrow, and others. But I wouldn't go to the ultra-scientific things that are beyond my competence, the ultra-physics issues that are beyond my competence.
Okay, thank you for that. We have one more, no, we have a few more questions. Sorry, okay, that's a website being referred. There are stories in the Bible that have scientific implications, such as the sun standing still for Joshua. I'm not sure, yes. or the creation of light in Genesis 1 before the creation of the sun, moon, and stars. I think Kevin was probably responding, making a statement, not a question. Science disputes the age of the Bible, of the biblical age of the earth. Can you comment? Science disputes the age of the biblical age of the earth. Can you comment?
Yeah, let it be clear that the Bible does not specify an age. The Bible records statements that we have to read and interpret. But I would recommend, it was human beings, going back to very scholarly Christians in the past that suggest an age, and modern Christians who are scientists that suggest an age. But I would highly recommend a video by, I think it's creation.com, Evolution's Achilles Heels, and the radiometric dating section of that. Excellent material. Radiometric dating is not a precise science. And I would just defer to say, look, check it out online. Just check out creation.com, Evolution's Achilles Heels. Fascinating. It looks at the rock structure and how they approximate an age from the rock structure and from the strata within the rock formations.
Yeah, it's just, as the person says, just a dispute. It doesn't mean that they're disproven right. Anything. It's just within dispute, the uranium testing of rocks and so on.
Right.
And that has been proven, as you say, to be very inaccurate.
Right. And it's the distinction I make in philosophy with my students between rebutting and refuting. Rebutting just means you're answering, maybe, unpleasantly, but to rebut is to prove the nonsense of an argument that you have challenged. So you can rebut, but you have not refuted. And that is when people stand up against the Bible and say the Bible has said this and the Bible is wrong. They are just simply offering a rebuttal. But is it a refutation? I would say no. They have tried their best for years, hundreds of years, thousands of years even, and they're coming out failing every time.
Okay, we have another one. Evolution is not a random process. The genetic variation on which natural selection acts may occur randomly, but natural selection itself is not random at all. The survival and reproductive success of an individual is directly related to the ways its inherited traits function in the context of its local environment. I read it again. Evolution is not a random process. The genetic variation on which natural selection acts may occur randomly, but natural selection itself is not random at all. The survival and reproductive success of an individual is directly related to the ways its inherited traits function in the context of its local environment. I think some people may have their mics on, so I'm just going to mute you until you if you have a question, you can raise your hands. Otherwise, it's just keeping noise in the background. Okay, sorry, go ahead, Reverend Clinton.
Yes, so all of that, natural selection and the internal genetic makeup of an organism or an animal or an entity, has to do with the information encoded in the gene pool of that organism or that entity. So we're going back now. The process is undirected, as Darwin and neo-evolutionists, neo-Darwinists would argue. But the selectivity within the cell, within the gene pool, is precisely co-encoded. There's no chance about that. So they would have to go and concede that the information is not arbitrary. It is encoded by an omniscient God in the life forms that he created originally. And they are given the creative command to reproduce after their own kind. But there's no telos, there's no mind, there's no guiding principle in evolution as expounded by Darwin's and neo-Darwinists.
Yeah, exactly. And as you mentioned before, evolutionists said, Dawkins said that there's no known cause for life.
Yeah, the origin of life. They are
obviously have to be random. You have to conclude that it's random because it's not organized. Right. It didn't come into existence other than by some accidental chance, which is chance is not a thing that causes something to come into existence anyway.
Right.
One more person, Eric. How can evolutionists defend a Big Bang theory of the Earth's formation with everything perfectly created to support living beings, which are themselves intricately designed? How can evolutionists defend a Big Bang theory of the Earth's formation with everything perfectly created to support living beings, which are themselves intricately designed? So the argument from design, maybe the Goldilocks zone is theological arguments as well, he's asking here.
Yeah, and so the bankruptcy of the idea of Big Bang. Bang, there's no tellus in a Big Bang. It's kind of arbitrary. Okay, you have a bang, but bang from what and into what? Why do we have order resulting from a bang? Where have we seen that in history? You drop a bomb on a place and the explosion, no scientist can predict what is going to, except you're going to have significant damage and death.
Thank you. Sean Green just added another one. He said the information contained within the DNA of living organisms allows for creatures to adapt to environments, allowing for variation of a kind or type, but never allows one creature to transform into another. There is no known evidence that I am aware of for this action. Again, the information contained within the DNA of the living organisms allows for creatures to adapt to environments, and it allows for variations of kinds and types and so on, but it never allows for one creature to transform into another creature. In other words, there are no new species on the face of the earth. They're all the same type. You can get variations of a kind, but you don't have a new species. So you want you to, he's responding probably to a question earlier, just making a comment.
Right.
But you can comment on that.
An invaluable comment there, yeah. Speciation is arbitrary in a sense that it is dependent on who is the taxonomist, who is deciding that this is a different species from another one. No animal, no entity can transform into a radically different entity unless gene pool for the end product is within the gene pool of the original product. Can't happen. A dog can never give rise to a cat. A bird can never give rise to an octopus. Gene pool has to be there because it is the genetic makeup within the gene pool that determines what that organism or entity or animal is going to become.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And before I ask you something that you mentioned in your discussion earlier, just to add to that, you need to evolve into a new species, you need to create new DNA information.
That's right.
And we do not create more. And actually, it is shown that all life loses the DNA. So you do not, nothing new is being speciated, nothing new is being created or comes about in life. We always lose DNA information. So that doesn't exist. You mentioned the origin of the universe. So your question on the origin of the universe, you were talking about, right, or cause and effect. First cause. Only something can cause something as opposed to nothing can cause something. So why must this cause be a personal cause?
Let me just pull up something here. So if we accept Jastrow, if Jastrow is the only scientist that anybody who is a trained scientist would recognize, that the universe was not eternal. So you have a first state of the universe, cannot have a scientific explanation, since there's nothing before it, and therefore it cannot be accounted for in terms of laws operating on initial conditions. It can only be accounted for in terms of an agent and his volitions, a personal explanation. So if what we are seeing here, if the universe definitely had to have been caused into being, then the cause would transcend time and matter. Therefore, the cause is timeless and immaterial, and only an entity with mind can decide, I am going to create a world. Nothing can do that which lacks mental cognition.
Mhm.
So that's why the cause of the universe has to be personal, timeless, and immaterial.
Okay, very good. You mentioned the gravity.
Yeah,
It was surrounding the idea that gravity, how can gravity come into existence before the materials that produce gravity, or the interaction
because
of
they say
materials that produce gravity?
this is the great design by Hawking and Mlodinow. And in their grand design, gravity explains what gravity, they say, is a law of nature. But as John Lennox countered them, if it is a law of nature, it has to presuppose the nature that would give rise to itself as a law. So you can't use gravity to explain the origin of the universe when gravity is a law of nature. And the universe, the complex thing that we call nature, the universe or the cosmos.
In keeping with that idea, if the evidence points to a personal designer, but does it point specifically to the God of the Bible?
Well, that is where the argument can continue. You have to look at the properties of the God that is described in the Bible, and think philosophically and scientifically about this cause of the universe. What properties would that cause have? Timeless, immaterial, omniscient kind of a thing, omnipotent, and see whether that is not what we generally call God. So the argument is not whether the universe had a cause. It's what is the nature of the cause. So somebody might pit a holy book and the God of that holy book as a cause, and then we'll talk about competing theologies, whether the God of the Bible or the God of the Quran, gods of the Bhagavad Gita or whatever.
And you can certainly delineate to the God of the Bible. I mean, immediately you can eliminate probably over 90% of the gods that exist, because many of them are immaterial, inorganic. Wood, stone, fire, sun, and so on.
And we're not eternal either. Some of the texts for these gods would say that thou camest into being, an Egyptian text of Ra. So if you're not eternal, you can't cause anything into being. You were caused, we can ask you, what caused you into being?
Staying with the pre-existence of the universe, astrophysicists tend to reach a stage where they ask the question of what is there or what was there before the so-called Big Bang. And they're stumped at this point and don't like to explore this discussion, too much further, because many of them are afraid of what the answer could be.
The implications, right?
You want to copy on that, yeah.
And the issue is going to be, if you have a bang, you have to have something, substance that is banging. So you're just pushing it back a little bit further or farther. What is it that caused the things that banged?
Yes.
You can't have a bang of absolute nothing. You couldn't call it a bang. More like a whimper and nothing, no sound, no nothing. But if you bang, the house blow up, then the house is there as substance. What caused the house to be there, to be blown up, or the whatever is being blown up? So they are just pushing it backwards, but they haven't escaped. How did anything come into being, and why is anything here as opposed to nothing? It must be an eternal entity that has caused what we now know to be the cosmos or the universe to come into being. And that entity has to be timeless, immaterial, and omniscient and omnipotent.
Excellent point, and thanks for repeating those key terms that we need to drive home constantly. I think people need to know that the Big Bang, which is not really a Big Bang, it's infinitesimally small thing that of gas, condensed gas, supposedly that increasing size of space is removed, is expanded. But the idea here is that there's the idea of a Big Bang is only one of many competing theories of evolution. It's one of the latest ones, and it's it's the most popular. So a
The
lot of
most
young
popular, the
people,
most enduring, yes.
exactly. But many of the evolutionists do not believe in it. They have their own theories. The idea that it came from nothing, the expansion theory, the collision theory, and they still have CERN, the CERN particle theory, where they're under the ground, a mile wide tunnel spinning particles and shooting particles at each other. Again, a living testament to that theory. And there are many, many other theories, but people only hear about the Big Bang, so they think that's the only one, the evolutionists. So many of them are fighting against or disputing even these same things within the idea of evolution.
Right. The Big Bang is just what media have popularized for the public. And so people are only aware of that. Unless you're in the deep sciences, then you would be aware of other theories.
Exactly. Thank you. You mentioned the presence of oxygen, and that's a very important thing you mentioned when it comes to the origin of life, because the presence of oxygen is absolutely necessary. But then at the same time, if oxygen was present, its reaction would burn or destroy those starting life, protolites. So that becomes a problem. You can't just go ahead.
You can't just appeal to oxygen and forget that it's extremely reactive and therefore can cause damage to the early so-called prebiotic life forming, as was in the quotation that I read, the last quotation from Michael Denton's book.
Just one more. As you rightly said, the passage is poetic in sense. It's figurative language. The heavens don't actually speak because there's a mouth. But the point that God is making here is that if you were to examine the heavens, the earth, the universe, you will find the evidence you need of that would point to me.
For God, that's right.
An intelligent designer.
Your pointers, yes. So it's like verbal and non-verbal language. And we are accustomed to figurative language. In fact, there's one that I used in a Bible study last Wednesday night that people don't recognize it's non-literal. When we say the sun sets or the sun rises in our weather reports, the sun doesn't literally rise or set. But we use that language, and if we're not careful, we think it's literal language. No, it's figurative. It's how the bodies move, that the sun appears to be setting and appears to be rising.
I think, I got one more. I think Sean added on something here while we were speaking. Where the use of time is concerned to mask evolutionary changes over time, the law of entropy suggests the very opposite, where natural things break down or get worn out over time. You want to respond to the law of entropy?
Yeah, I don't recall much about it, but one thing I don't know, what you just said is correct. And two, unless mental intelligence intervenes in the breakdown, it will continue to break down to nothingness. We intervene when we have a bad piece of software for our computer, we get a better one. Somebody has to examine that bad one, correct the glitches in it, or recommend a new one. So you have to counter decay with intelligence.
We have one here, and this is not a question. Can Dr. Chisholm send a PDF of this bulletin to sean.bullen@gmail.com? So I guess you can look in the chat and write that off.
Well, Roger would have to deal with that because Roger has the script, and he has a handout for everybody. If you want the handout, then you can
contact Roger Marshall.
Right, Project Probe, and you can get an 8-page handout of the lecture.
Yes.
But
I'll just put my number in the chat here quickly, and they can always reach me, Project Probe.
Right. For me, I can make, I don't have any problem with the lecture itself being given to whomever needs it. If you're on the platform, on any of the platforms, you're entitled to make a request for not just the handout. If you read that and you're not satisfied with it, you'd like the full lecture, I have no problems with Project Probe releasing the lecture to you.
Okay.
If you use it to make money, just remember your brother. That's all I would ask.
All right, we hear that loud and clear. We have just two more. PW, what is the implication that there is a personal creator?
That we are accountable to that personal creator. And the gods of the East are not fussy about morality. The God of the Bible is very fussy about morality. So if there's a God, then you have to reckon with the life possibility. I would move with probability, likelihood, certainty in the Bible that you are accountable one day. You have to give an account to that God ultimately.
Yes, there's a judgment day.
Precisely.
Yes. I have one from Linda Williams. I believe that's Dr. Linda Williams.
I know that sister quite well.
Yeah, many today believe there is intelligent design because it is irrefutable, but they point to extraterrestrial origins. How do you speak to this? I think Richard Dawkins said that life started by his theory called panspermia, where so he agrees with biological theory that life can only come from life. So he disagrees with all these other evolutionists that say.
He just appeals to alien life.
Right. So he appeals to alien life. Go ahead.
Right. Creation.com has an excellent, check this site. I would recommend to anybody they have produced a major movie on on aliens.
Yes.
Yeah, they have a major movie and I think a book on that. So I can only defer and say, check out creation.com online and check out their movie.
Alien Invasion. Alien Invasion is a video.
That's right, that's what it's called. Yeah, check it out.
Gary Bates. Yeah, President of Christian.com.
Very well done. Matching whatever you would see at in a cinema or you would get from a regular movie production company.
Right. Okay. I think we've come to the end of the question and answer section. We thank you all for the great questions that were fielded to Dr. Chisholm. I thank you, Darren, for putting the Project Probe email in the chat. So if you want to contact us, Roger will respond when you send to that email, and he has. I think the information is electronic, so handouts are electronic, so you get it via email. Should probably get it all tonight once you send your information, your request to us at Project Probe min@gmail.com. Again, I want to thank Reverend Clinton. Do you have any last words that you want to parting words before you go?
Just what I usually call when I mention it, a vulgar advertisement. I would recommend my website, the Chisholm Source. There are CDs there for Christians. Just check the store and you'll see quite a bit of products there that you can MP3 downloads of material that are produced over the. What
is the website again?
The Chisholm Source.
Yes,
Chisholm is CHISHOLM. Source.
Is it .com or .org? .com.
.com.
ChisholmSource.com.
Right.
And I have one more burning question at the end, a doorknob, by Rolians, I believe, Leandre, if I pronounce it correctly, incorrectly, forgive me. Can Dr. Chisholm, did I get it right? You know him. Okay.
Yes, I know him quite well. I think he was a student of mine at JTS.
But there you go. He's asking you, can you elaborate a little further on the Big Bang Theory?
Well, so just think of a bang. Okay, so they had a bang of the towers in the US. To have a bang, to call it a bang, there's a substance that has exploded because it was caused to explode. So you must have something to explode for you to talk about a bang. But what was that primary substance that would have been there already? Was it eternal too, as Sagan would have argued? Or what really banged? Something, or did nothing bang? Which is kind of a crazy idea. You have to have some pre-existing substance to talk about a bang. And all you're doing is pushing it back. Who or what caused let's say, primary matter as alpha matter. Alpha matter has to be there to have a bang. Who caused alpha matter to come into existence? Itself, which is idiotic in terms of logic? Or did somebody or something cause alpha matter to come into being? So you're just pushing it back. But if anything is here now or has been here for a while, then you can ask what caused or who caused it to be. And you go back. You can't go have an infinite regress of real entities here. If there's nothing here and we're talking about imaginary numbers, then fine, you can go back to a regress to infinity. But if something is here, the book stops with one entity originally, and that entity has to be uncaused and eternal. And you can't ask of an uncaused eternal entity who caused it to be. That is what we call in philosophy a category mistake. It has not come into being, so you can't ask who caused it into being. It has always been there. And that's the biblical view of God. Transcends time, transcends matter, because God is eternal. Not caused, not self-caused, but uncaused, and thus eternal.
And the good point, and the law of conservation refutes the idea of an eternal existing matter, because it says that matter had to have a beginning because matter is running down, and eventually all matter would turn to dust. So there was a starting point in which matter existed or began. Mm-hmm. So the law refutes this idea that matter always existed. So we come to in agreement with what the Bible is saying, that and what you're saying, that it had to have a beginning. Right. It had to have a cause, since it's not eternal. Also, the law of conservation also talks about the idea that matter cannot bring itself into existence either. So the universe cannot bring itself into existence. It can't create matter. It can't destroy matter. Yeah,
a self-caused entity is an absurdity logically, because it would have to be first as cause and then secondarily as effect, and that cannot happen logically.
Yes, it will have to exist before itself to bring itself.
Yeah, it would have to exist before itself, and that's just crazy.
Yeah.
A self-caused entity is a logical.
Maybe I'm not sure. Maybe Leandria probably wanted a little bit more on the process where there was an expansion, so-called expansion of space, and that ball of gas followed that expansion over 10 to the 20th time in seconds. It reached a certain distance, a certain size, and then eventually, you can go on, so I'll skip a lot of that process. And eventually you had this massive expanse of gas, which eventually cooled. And as it cooled, it turned to solids, and solid formed rocks and so on, which hit into each other and then produce massive masses such as planets and suns and so on. Gases were formed, and then the Earth was cool enough eventually for life then to begin on Earth. So that's in a nutshell what Big Bang Theory is.
Well, my brother knows how to reach me, so rather than taking up much more time here, he knows he can always get in touch with me via email.
We are close to the end, 5 to 8, so we can finish here. I want to thank you very much again on behalf of Project Pro Ministries. Sorry, Roger could not connect.
It's actually on no.
I'm here. I'm here under Darian Marshall's name.
Yeah. Hi, Roger. I turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Clinton and Vincent, for such a lively and well-conducted lecture and Q&A sessions. Thank you very much, audience, for attending and for asking your questions. You have been very interactive, and we thank you for this. This is the first part of a 4-part series that we will be conducting. VC will run from, the next session will be on September the 17th, October the 15th, and November the 19th. Next session, which will be Saturday, September the 17th, Reverend Clinton will be addressing the topic, the Bible, is it really inerrant or just reliable? And he will be examining problem texts and issues such as, is slavery approved in the Bible? Is God a moral monster? And much more. So we invite you to put that down in your diary and be sure to join us in our next session on September the 17th, the same time, 6 p.m., Lord willing, for part 2 of this series of lectures by Reverend Clinton Chisholm. Thank you again, Rev. Thank you again, Vincent. Thank you all for coming. God bless you richly. I pray that your faith has been strengthened as believers in Christ. And if perchance anyone has been in this forum and you have not trusted Christ as Savior, we pray you would do so. You would take to heart all the evidence that shouts God. And he loves you and he wants to have a personal relationship with you. God bless. Good night, everyone. Thank you again for coming.
My joy and pleasure, brethren. Blessings.
Blessings. Also, do remind to post your request for the handout in our email us and let us know you request a handout of tonight's lecture. Thank you. Bye-bye.